Hello and welcome back as we gather together for our devotion time. Today's title is Christ the Victor, and the scripture comes from the Gospel of Mark in chapter 16, verses 1 through 6. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man, dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here." With the death of Jesus on Calvary, we witness amid the many soldiers and criminals, gawkers and passers-by, what looks like the final triumph of evil. All the ugliness and violence we can imagine was embodied in the events that, as their climax, the 6 hours during which God in human form hung on a cross on a hillside outside the gates of Jerusalem. We cannot really appreciate Easter until we have been to the cross. The power of this day lies beyond our comprehension until we have journeyed through hell itself, immersed in the darkest of places. It is only once we have seen the full extent of evil on display there and witnessed the apparent victory of death that we can begin to appreciate the triumph that is Easter. Jesus died at about 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. The Jewish Sabbath would begin at sunset 3 hours later. And this, the Passover Sabbath, was particularly important. The Jewish authorities did not want the bodies of the crucified still hanging on their crosses, so they petitioned Pilate to hasten their deaths by breaking their legs. The soldiers did so with the thieves, but as they came to Jesus, they found he had already breathed his last. Approximately 2 hours before sunset, Jesus and the 2 thieves were taken down from their crosses. And since Jewish regulations did not permit burial on the Sabbath, there was only a short window of time in which to make arrangements and prepare Jesus' body for burial. His disciples had scattered, but all 4 Gospels tell us that one of his followers, Joseph of Arimathea, was courageous enough to petition Pilate for permission to bury Jesus, and that Pilate granted his request. Mark tells us Joseph was a respected member of the council, that is, of the Sanhedrin that had condemned Jesus to death. Matthew tells us he was a rich man and a disciple of Jesus. Luke describes him as a good and righteous man who, though a member of the council, had not agreed to their plan and action. John tells us he was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews. The composite picture they paint dispels the notion that only the poor, the uneducated, and sinners were followers of Jesus. And it shows us that not all the Jewish religious leaders sought Jesus' death. Joseph's fear of identifying himself publicly as one of Jesus' disciples makes him not unlike a number of respected members of society I have known. They fear what others might think of them if they were to identify themselves as persons who take their faith seriously. What might have been the cost to Joseph, a respected and wealthy member of Jewish society, had he identified himself as one of Jesus' disciples? If he had done so, regardless, publicly declaring his support for Jesus, how might he have influenced others? How might things have turned out differently? In what ways do we identify with Joseph? Are we ever a secret disciple for fear of what others will think? Joseph's fear apparently left him when Jesus died, and he hurried to prepare the body for burial. John tells us as he was joined by another secret disciple of Jesus, Nicodemus, who was also a leader of the Jews. Nicodemus brought with him approximately 100 pounds of myrrh and aloes, and the two men, with no time for full burial preparations, quickly cleaned Jesus' body and wrapped it in a linen shroud. Tells us that Joseph placed Jesus in his own new tomb, freshly hewn in the rock, in what John describes as a garden area near the site of Jesus' crucifixion. Joseph then had a large stone rolled in front of the entrance. If we combine the gospel accounts, the total number of people in attendance at Jesus' interment was 4. Joseph, Nicodemus, and 2 of the women who followed Jesus, Mary Magdalene and another Mary, were the only ones who dared to come. The apostles were behind locked doors, terrified they might be arrested and subject to the fate that had befallen their Lord. With sunset came the Passover Sabbath, and while others celebrated, those who knew and loved Jesus were in shock, traumatized by what they had witnessed. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next week.